I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For Yahweh, your Elohim, will be with you wherever you go. You see the rain's outside, inside I'm crying. My pain's so high, almost lost my mind. But I'm happier now that I bow down before him. Ask me what I'm doing for him. Yah should make you dance. The word should make you move. Forget about your cares. It's not up to you. Let's show the Father praise. Living in these last days, we don't have no time. His grace we cannot waste. Give him all the glory. Shout unto the sky. Girl, get on your knees. Pray to the Most High. Stop the blood clot warrior, cause it won't do none. Claim the victory. The battle's already won. The rain's outside, inside I'm crying. My pain's so high, almost lost my mind. But I'm happier now that I bow down before him. Ask me what I'm doing for him. And his glory is my story. I thought I never would be hurt again. Till the Most High made me whole again. Now I'm a keeper. I'm my sister's keeper. I hope you never have to cry again, friend. May the Most High lift your head again, friend. So he gets the glory, 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 glory. Keeper, keeper, keeper.
You're tuned in to My Sister's Keeper radio show each and every Sunday at 6 p.m. here on Blog Talk Radio. Be sure to follow My Sister's Keeper radio on all social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and join our live podcast discussions on all podcast platforms where we provide a voice for today's Hebrew woman. Based on the foundation of the Word, we discuss culture, music, news, health, family, relationships, and provide a safe platform for our daughters of Zion to find spirit when coming into the truth.
Welcome, Akoti. This is your host, Safari Yasharal, here live on My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast each and every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to follow us on Facebook. And today, Akoti, you are joining us and tuned in because we're going to be talking about the power of prayer. Today, we're going to be exploring the incredible potential of prayer to transform our lives and connect us with our higher selves and our higher power. So we'll be diving deep into some different topics related to prayer, including the science behind prayer, prayer and mental health, the role of prayer in religious and spiritual traditions, prayer in time of crisis, and the power of group prayer, the transformative power of forgiveness, and the connection between prayer and gratitude, all this and much, much more. We're also going to be listening from a variety of different spiritual traditions, and they'll share their insights and experiences with prayer because it's just so important for us to know everything that there is to know. So we'll hear stories of how prayer has transformed the lives of individuals and communities. So, whether you're looking to deepen your spiritual practice, find guidance during difficult times, or just simply learn more about the power of prayer, we hope that you're going to enjoy today's episode. So make sure to stay tuned in and make sure you follow us on all social media platforms. That's IG, Twitter, Facebook. That's My Sister's Keeper radio show. And don't forget, join us in our Facebook group for our 90-day Sisterhood Spiritual Challenge, where it's going to be 90 days of scripture read, so you don't want to miss that. All this and much, much more here on My Sister's Keeper radio show. Stay tuned. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I ain't running no more. I ain't sinning no more. They keep killing our folks. Only y'all giving me hope. Been telling me elements.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Remember who he sent. Yahusha, perfect man. Now I can't go back to where I've been.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
You give me all that I need. Guide me into your kingdom. No hiding all that you bring. You lift me up on my feet. You give me all that I need. Step on his head one time. He ain't winning this fight. Yeah. That who been giving me light. Only one him on my side.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I don't need nothing to help me decide. Yeah, look at the way we reside. Look at the land. Look at the stuff that they hide. They say we doing so good. They say we save. It's really where evil resides. They call them holidays. They out here worshiping idols. I'm never just speaking on go. They tell you listen to music, watch TV, play games. Don't you know that it's killing your soul?
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Perfect man. Now I can't go back to where I've been. Hide me under your wings. It's a light I've never seen. You lift me off of my feet. You give me all that I need. Guide me into your kingdom. No hiding all that you bring. You lift me off of my feet. You give me all that I need.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Bless your heart, need it in the worst way. Apocalypse to the sunny sky on your day. I'm a champion.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Regenerated, I'm traveling through time. Can't miss me on the Father's front line.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Fue un Jezabel, más como una pelena. Reino semi reina, tú sabes cómo es. Sigue para adelante que atrás en el left, Dale, dale,
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
En la calle, predicando Cristo y todo lo que él hizo. Para que estamos listos para el paraíso. And when the Lord put alive in front of you, you best believe he saw David inside of you. So grab your hammer like you were Maccabees, baby. Most High wanna see if you believe with me. So don't sweat it, you gon' get it. And if you're handicapped, then grab that prosthetic.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
how could my prayer, how could my meditation, how could my loving thoughts of gratitude and appreciation possibly impact the healing of another person in the room with me or halfway around the world? And the answer is that we are deeply connected through a phenomenon that is known as entanglement. Entanglement is the term in physics that tells us once something is unified, once something begins as a whole, even though it is separated physically by many miles or light years, is what they're finding in the cosmos, energetically everything's still connected. Why is that important? Because if we go back far enough in time, there was a point in time when you, me, and the earth were all connected before what is called the Big Bang, the big release of energy. When that happened, physically particles began to separate. Energetically, the particles remain connected. We are part of this earth, and we are part of one another. And that empowers you, and it empowers me to participate in the healing of our bodies and those of our loved ones in ways that science is only beginning to understand.
So entanglement explains scientifically how our prayers might work. But there's a whole aspect of faith and prayer that can't be explained through science. People travel all over the world to holy sites to receive energy or faith healing. Is it their unshakable belief in God's power and therefore the placebo effect that is responsible for the healing? Or is there an actual divine energy that is causing their transformation? Either way, I'm fascinated by the mystical. And if faith healing works for people, why not respect the possibility and keep an open mind?
You know, the science behind prayer is a fascinating topic that explores the physical and psychological effects of prayer on the human body and brain. While prayer has long been considered a spiritual practice, recent research has shed light on the many ways in which prayer can promote health and well-being. One area of research has focused on the effects of prayer on the brain. Studies have found that prayer can activate certain areas of the brain, including the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with self-awareness and empathy, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which is involved in emotion regulation and decision-making. Prayer has also been found to increase levels of certain neurotransmitters, such as serotonin and dopamine, which are associated with feelings of happiness and well-being. Another area of research has explored the effects of prayer on the body. Studies have found that prayer can lower blood pressure, reduce stress levels, and boost the immune system. One study even found that patients who were prayed for by others had shorter hospital stays and fewer complications than those who were not prayed for. Of course, the effects of prayer can vary depending on the individual and their beliefs. Some studies have found that prayer can be more effective for people who have a strong faith or believe in a higher power, while others have found that even non-believers can benefit from the practice of prayer. Overall, the science behind prayer is a rich and fascinating area of study that can provide valuable insight into the many ways in which this practice can promote health and well-being. So the real question is how do you utilize prayer in your life? How is it guiding you? In what ways is it healing you? And in what ways is it giving you a transition from before you were praying? So tap in, Akoti. Tell me, what do you think about that? Stay tuned. We have more here on My Sisters Keeper Radio Show. You're tuned into My Sisters Keeper Radio Show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sisters Keeper Radio Show and podcast.
Father, you're worthy to be praised. All praises be to the Most High.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
And I sing my praise to you. I sing my praise. Even in the midst of my storm. When I don't see your way out, I lift my voice to you.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I worship and I sing my praise to you. I sing my praise. Even in the midst of my storm. When I don't see your way out.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Oh God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
You'll raise up
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
to keep your commandments. And when they were in Egypt, you sent forth Moses to set them free. So I worship you. I worship you.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Even in the midst of my storm, when I don't see your way out, I lift my voice to you, Lord. I worship you.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I sing my praise. Even in the midst of my storm, when I don't see your way out, I lift my voice to you.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show
You
and
said in
podcast.
your commandments we should not serve no God besides you. For you are a jealous God, so we should only bow before you. I know we
You're
have
tuned
been
into My
sinned.
Sister's Keeper radio
I know
show
we
and
have
podcast.
gone astray, but here I am on my knees. I'm begging you, have mercy on me, Lord.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
And I sing my praise to you. Even in the midst of my storm, when I don't see your way out, I
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I worship you. And I sing my praise to you. I sing my praise.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
When I don't see your way out, I lift my voice to you, Lord, to you. Yeah, I'll keep your commandments.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and
Your
podcast.
will and your way, I submit to you. Yeah.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
People they come and go, some permanent, some are just seasonal. Born in a world so cold, every day's a fight just to keep your soul. I took a look in the mirror, now I can see clear my reality. It couldn't be any clearer. Abba is with you that I need to.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Your word is written in it. James 1 and verse 2, the trials to prove.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I'm enduring to the end. I'm enduring to the end. I'm enduring to the end. Yeah.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I'm enduring to the end. I'm enduring to the end.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Do you think well made? 'Cause giving up it wouldn't be.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Gotta hold on. 'Cause life can be some boys. Comes with the road and your word and written in it. James 1 and verse 2. The trials to prove. Oh, you really in it. But I'm enduring to the end.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I'm enduring to the end. I'm enduring to the end. I'm enduring to the end. I'm enduring to the end.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Please don't let me crash. Holding on to hope, but my spirit and my flesh clash. Even if they persecute me, I bless. If you tell me test the spirit, I test. Romans 12:12 and prayer 24/7. Reprove me 'cause you let me know the steps to reach the heavens. Matthew 16:16 is my confession. Hold on to you.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Show me what to do as the end is drawing near. Need your spirit, I can feel it getting closer. I'm enduring to the end.
I'm enduring to the end. I'm enduring to the end.
Only because of
I'm enduring to the end. Keep enduring to the
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Keep enduring to the end. Yeah, we almost at the end.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Keep enduring to the end. Yeah, we almost at the end.
Insight, as we tap into His power, God will guide us along the way. One of the ways that we have utilized prayer at Backyard Church is a prayer walk. This is something that's a fairly popular thing to do. It's done all over the world. It's done by missionaries. And more we have to see ourselves as missionaries in this world. That the common everyday Christian just needs to advance the mission of God and needs to be equipped for mission. And I want to give you a really simple way to engage that and to grow in your ability to engage people who need Jesus. And here's how we start. We start very simple, we start very small, and then we progress from there into things that at first might be a little bit too difficult to do, but as you progress and as you gain experience and as you gain confidence and as you pray, God will enable you to go deeper and deeper into the life of your neighborhood. So really, we're seeing our neighborhood as a church parish. We're seeing our immediate neighborhood as our church, as the people who God has put in our path, and that we need to be reaching out to them. We need to be ministering to them. We need to be loving them. We need to be serving them and praying for them.
That's right, Akoti. We need to be serving and praying in our community. Welcome back. This is Tafari Yasharal here on My Sister's Keeper radio show, and today we're talking about the power of prayer. So we were diving into the power of community in prayer. And then, let's explore the way in which coming together can help to strengthen one's faith and lead to positive outcomes. Now, we know that prayer can be deeply personal. It's more like an individual practice, but when done in a group, it can also create a sense of unity and belonging. Praying with others can also provide a sense of comfort and support, especially during difficult times. when people come together to pray for a common cause, such as like healing for a sick loved one or guidance through a difficult situation, that shared experience can be pretty powerful. And it's a great source of encouragement and hope to those that are involved and to those that, need that prayer. So in addition to emotional support, group prayer can also have practical benefits. So like in some cases, communities can come together and they can pray for like a specific outcome, such as relief from a natural disaster or success in some sort of business venture, praying for protection in your community. I know where I'm from, Inglewood, we definitely could have used a little bit more community prayer. Our communities were close. We were like family. It took a village. We all knew whom each other's family members were, and we all looked out for each other. So I just, I would have liked to have seen more prayer in the community. I think, what could have happened in our community had we come together and prayed for certain things to bypass us. So the act of praying can also help, build stronger relationships with the community. Sharing a common spiritual practice, it can develop a deeper sense of empathy and understanding towards one another. You can get to know your neighbors better. It can strengthen your bonds, and it can promote a more sense of unity in your community rather than you just being there alone. So overall, the power of community and prayer, it definitely has many different ways in which we can come together and come together with others to pray. And that can definitely provide the emotional, practical, and spiritual relief that we need in our community. Because I'm going to tell you, society, we need more prayer. So, what, Coach T, what could you do to start to involve that in your prayer life? Maybe you want to get together with some sisters and start to pray for a common cause. Let's do that in the group more often. Now, we do have the 90-day Spiritual Sisterhood Spiritual Challenge that we post on a daily, but it would be really wonderful if we could come together and create a group, a community prayer time that we can allow individuals to, ask for some special prayer. And again, we pray for our nation every single day. We're asking the Most High to protect us and to guide us in these challenging times. And so, yeah, it's just a little food for thought. But I don't know. What do you think? Go ahead and comment in our Facebook group and keep on listening because we got more coming up next. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Thinking how I'm gonna get paid just to fix a plate, was gonna buy a house, but I watched the news and saw the interest rates, was like, no way. UK, disgrace, fair to say Babel's falling down, the head's gone, the neck's wobbling, the precepts.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I was in a trance like Ezekiel's vision, all seeing beings with the eyes within and the wheels around them, that's the Sephirim, up and down. Jacob's ladder, ministering to the Kodashim, rich in spirit with a pure heart. On a feast day, I always got my staff shofar, blast clears the atmosphere. Should I tell him? You should hire. I've been winning off the umpire.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I've been winning, check my pedigree. Don't envy me, nigga, please. Jealousy made the brothers reach. One cool, Yasharel assemble. We gon' do them all like the Maccabees. Got a war and I got a peace. On this occasion, I had to load the corn. Just quit my job, I don't like the boss. I've seen both sides like a coin toss. Confidence is at our highest level. Moving bold and we can never settle. We're moving bold and we can
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
One time, how shall I soon return? Yeah. The system's falling, Babylon is mourning. I've been going in since I got the calling. Silly Pharisees fueled by jealousy, got their head in books like a bunch of geeks. Jeez, I feel sorry for the sheep they lead. Hypocrisy hidden. Middlemen trying to play the plug. Miss me with it, man. I'm border clubs on the borderline. I was front line. If the chauffeur
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Got the buzz, I made the spirit shake. Trembling when they see my face. Need a veil like I'm Moshe. I'm the modern version of Jeremiah. No fear, no fear. Let's trust, I could never trust. That's for Bojo.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
That's my ancestors and we never lacking. Really here for the people there. When it's past, I'm never passive. It's lunchtime and my belly's active. I'll eat a rapper like a bowl of pasta. Televise it, I can never hide it. Speak the truth, I can't compromise it. If you're feeling low, check your spiritual diet. What you're eating, is it KFC? Brother rolled a leaf, but it wasn't weed. Carry earth and you're a real G. Speak the truth until the ears bleed. Don't ever think you can bully weed. We just woke up from a deep sleep. The who is gathering is
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Praise a little. I've been on that heavy, then I drift a little. Ain't nobody perfect, but I know that one thing's true. One and only. No religion. No addition. To my daily reading, made a huge decision.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
You might think I'm crazy, but I'm telling you, have faith. I felt his presence when those tears ran down my face. He brought me out this crazy world.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Yes, indeed, he brought me out this. Driving on the highway, used to pop in my tapes. Rolling on the 5 around 4:30 in the morning. Change it up a little, play some gratitude. Just so I could thank him for my good mood and like an attitude. Then the sound changes, deep voice, soft tone. I was wondering if this was really.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
He said, I see you. Tears ran down my face, couldn't believe what I had heard. Rewinded every video. I know this sounds absurd. I'm sitting in my whip like, did that really happen? Am I tripping? Am I crazy? Or did God just tap in? After that, all I knew was that my vision was unblurred. Yeah, who spoke to me and I felt every single word.
Spirituality is love and compassion, as far as I'm concerned, and meaning that, and particularly meaning that you are not just being rationally stuck within sort of what you think your body is wired to do. You're going into a deeper area of your mind where you kind of are asserting your free will, really. And you're choosing to be friendly and compassionate with people, whether or not they irritate you or whether or not they've done something to you. You're nevertheless choosing some sort of extraordinary, what we might say extraordinary. It shouldn't be extraordinary, it's actually not really, but we're conditioned to think it's an extraordinary response or outreach to people. And that is spirituality. Spirituality really is touching, and when you do that, and you sort of let go of your sort of self-protective and defensive controls, what you tap into is the nature of the universe, which is the flow of energy interconnecting things. And so then you naturally feel like interconnecting. And spirituality is where you let go, therefore, of your narrow, tight sort of control, identifying yourself just as your body, and I'm holding on to this, and I'm holding on to my chair, and this kind of thing. And that's really what it is. And whereas religion, and it is, of course, the heart of religion, too. But unfortunately, religion has this other component where it goes into, instead of what the sociologists might call pattern transcending activity, or mental activity as well as behavior, it's into pattern maintenance activity. And it becomes a tool of the state and the society and the conventional culture to control people and say you have to do this and you need that ritual, you obey this rule, and it stifles people's spirituality, actually. And in the name of it, people will kill each other, and they'll hate people who don't have the same belief. Instead of being loving and friendly, they will misinterpret, or they'll allow the priesthoods to misinterpret the teachings of the great founders who were truly spiritual and who said, don't behave like that, and they start behaving like that, like the Roman Catholic Church. The Catholic part is great, universal, and the Church of Jesus is great, is really great. But the Roman part is the Roman Empire from Constantine, and it's a dominating thing, and it isn't nice. And it's conflicting even for the priesthood. And of course, many of the priests are saintly and wonderful. When they were more great mystics, they were better before the Protestants made them try to be more social, but like to compete with them. But they too much adopted the stance of the Roman Empire is the problem. And religions do that. Buddhism too. It becomes a control mechanism rather than a liberating mechanism.
So the scholars will say that religion can be used primarily as a control mechanism, and the first thing that he talked about was the Roman Catholic Church. But anyways, we're talking about the power of prayer, and now we're talking about, spirituality versus religious prayer. The role of prayer is central to most religious and spiritual traditions around the world, and in these traditions, prayer is seen as a means of communicating with a higher power, seeking guidance and strength, expressing gratitude, and participating in communal worship. So in many religious traditions, prayer takes on specific forms and structures, often involving specific words, gestures, postures. These practices are often deeply rooted in tradition and can serve as a means of connecting with one's culture and religious heritage. But in addition to formalized prayers, many religious traditions also emphasize the importance of personal and spontaneous prayer. This type of prayer allows individuals to express their own thoughts and feelings in their own words and can be a powerful means of communicating with a higher power and seeking personal guidance. And I don't need many people to tell me that, because in the word it says that we shouldn't pray in vain repetitions in the first place. So that's something that we don't do, right, Akoti? The role of prayer in religious and spiritual traditions is multifaceted and varies across different faiths and cultures. However, some common themes can be found across many traditions. For example, prayer is often seen as a means of seeking guidance, protection, and strength from a higher power. It can also serve as a means of expressing gratitude for blessings received and acknowledging one's dependence on a higher power, showing proof of faith. Prayer is also often viewed as a means of fostering community and building a sense of shared purpose and identity amongst believers. So in many religious traditions, communal prayer is an important part of religious worship, and it provides an opportunity for believers to come together and express their shared faiths and beliefs. But overall, prayer in religious and spiritual traditions can reflect deeper connections between spirituality, faith, and your personal beliefs. Now, through prayer, individuals can seek guidance, strength, and a greater sense of connection to something larger than themselves, whether that be a higher power, a shared community of believers, or a deeper sense of personal purpose and meaning. But make sure that it doesn't offend the Most High. Make sure that it doesn't offend Yah's holy and mighty word. And see, sometimes we have to understand that there is a line being drawn in the sand as it relates to religious and spirituality. Most people think that when we say that we've come into the truth or that we're an Israelite, that, what religion is that? What religion is that? And that's such a weird question, because it's not a religion. It's my nationality. It's who I am. I identified myself in the word, the tribe that I'm a part of. I'm a part of the 12 tribes. And so I am Yah's chosen. And then from there, well, then what does that mean? Well, it just means that I take away the Roman Catholic Church away from my belief system, and I do my very best to study his laws, his statutes, his commandments according to the most ancient Hebraic understanding and, through our forefathers. And so then that's where you have to trust and count on the wisdom of your ministry or your teachers to teach you the proper way. But again, even scholars of other descents will agree that religion was implemented in our society from the Roman Catholic Church, and from there it's been history. So I don't know, what do you think about it? Religious versus spirituality and prayer, and how do you set yourself apart at Code T? Stay tuned, we have a little bit more coming. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
It's over now, the time is now. It's a new sheriff in town, and we ain't here to mess around. We had it all along. The top spot is hidden in the song. A hidden fly. The yoke is broken, prophecy spoken. Our fathers wish they could live.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
After all the shame to God be the glory, you are worth it. When I think about the sacrifice that you made, love you demonstrate you did it, cast us all away. Mercy went before us, you gave us your saving grace. Thankful for the covenant, and now we seek your face. See up, your words don't change, no matter what.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
We're conquerors, kings and queens. Can nobody ever yoke our necks in bondage with chains? Who would have thought Yah would switch the switch on them? The true Israelites all over the world are waking up. We had enough of this oppression from our counterparts. It's our mission to be.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
We gon' keep our head up, never will we live. Together we fail, together we will rise. The sacrifice that you made, love you demonstrate you did it.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Thankful for the covenant, and now we seek your face. See up, your words don't change, no matter what.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Kings and queens, can nobody ever yoke our necks in bondage with chains? And we going back again. No way we going back again. We
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
when I think about the sacrifice that you made, love you demonstrate you did it, cast us all away. Mercy went before us, you gave us your saving grace. Thankful for the covenant, and now we seek your face. See up,
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
like Yahshua, and it picks me up. We're conquerors, kings and queens. Can nobody ever yoke our necks in bondage with chains? When I think about the sacrifice that you made, love you demonstrate you did it, cast us all away.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Thankful for the covenant, and now we seek your face. See up, your words don't change, no matter what. I put my life on the line, like Yahshua, and it picks me up. We're conquerors, kings and queens. Can nobody ever yoke our necks in bondage with chains?
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Tara, that one you go to me, Black Kingdom, you seen? Tell me something, something, something.
Don't you know that you're a star? Tell me something, something, something. Coming from the line of our black kings, black kings, black
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Tell me something, something, something. Don't you know that you're a star? Tell me something, something, something. Coming from the line of our black kings.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper. You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Bless you with your melanin. Don't you dare be ashamed of your dark skin. You're a black king. They bring you up for him cause you're a god on the earth. You're coming from far, my Israelite star. You know the real Jews are dark. Coming from the day I know our ark. The Bible dictionary.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Egyptians, the Canaanites, Ethiopians, Egyptians, the Canaanite. It takes a black man to lead. It takes a black man to lead his people out of poverty. Ay, his people.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Something, something, something. Don't you know that you're a star? Tell me something, something, something. Coming from the line of our black kings, black kings, black kings.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Tell me something, something, something. Don't you know that you're a star? Tell me something, something, something. Coming from the line of our black kings, black kings, black kings, black king, my king.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Well, we start to carry them in our cities. Nigerian kings to the world. We better than them, we so freaky. We got the powers and skills of our furniture for the east. We got the strength and source above beneath for the south. Satan of the Sokoto, where you get yeah, me.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Zimbabwean boy with a Tara Giala. Queen from Jamaica, I'm proud of being black. Proud of being black. Toda than is Andy. Dark skin, chocolate. Chocolate, so nice. Brown skin, chocolate. Chocolate, black kings, you are.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
China Wakadaru, remember it's a masterpiece. Blessed by the most high God, strong black kings.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Don't you know that you're a star? Tell me something, something, something. Coming from the line of our black.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
My king, tell me something, something, something. Don't you know that you're a star? Tell me something, something, something. Coming from the line of our.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Black kings, black king, my king, my king, my king, my king.
Black key skinning ke black yanana. No more penny like waje me papa.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
I'm the big black guy with that big black need to get home and the Melanie be calling she the chocolate wop. This that black magic and I.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Yeah, I got my brother screaming Black Lives Matter. Going ever harder, popote me nakayaga, okay. Yeah, from the land of Jomo, Bongo Paka Congo, African wall, motherland representative. The one I do was dirty, but we gonna keep it clean. I and I jobless, all we do is win.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Black power, need that black Maybach. Man, I do that clad like clean, all black
Tell me
aid.
something, something, something. Don't you know that you're a star? Tell me something, something, something. Coming from the line of our black kings, black kings, black kings.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast.
Something, don't you know that you're a star? Tell me something, 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 coming from the line of our black kings, black kings, black kings, black king, my king, my king, my king, my king.
You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. This is Tafari Yasharal, and you're tuned in to My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. The power of prayer, sis. Listen, we've covered a lot today, but let's always end our show with You're tuned into My Sister's Keeper radio show and podcast. See, in Mark 11, verse 24 says, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." So when you have faith in what you're praying to the Most High, you need to believe. Otherwise, the prayers are on deaf ears. You need to believe. And you should also believe that you will receive it. Now, you might not receive it when you think you're going to receive it. And you might not receive it the way that you want. But this is his vow to you. James 5:16, "Therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working." So you need to know that when you confess your sins, your faults to one another, you pray for one another, that it's going to come back to you, okay? So make sure to include praying for others, and also confess your sins to people that you trust. Confess your sins and make amends with those when it is an opportunity for you to do so, when it's not going to offend or hurt anyone. Philippians 4 and verses 6-7, which is one of my favorite. "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to Yah. And the peace of Yah, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Yeshua." So just make sure that you're not stressing about every little thing that doesn't go your way. You know that the Most High takes care of the birds and all the fowls in the air and under the sea, and they don't do anything, but they get fed every day. They're safe. So what more are you, a human being? You think that he doesn't love you the same? Don't insult Yah by being so doubtful about your life. You're always worried about things. Some people will kill themselves when things don't go their way financially, and but just give yourself another chance. We are not perfect. And what Yah takes away from you, it probably wasn't meant for you in the first place. Ephesians 6:18, "Praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints." So just keep yourself in the Spirit. Dwell on his word day and night with all prayer and supplication, and stay alert. John 14, verses 13 and 14, "Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it." And so let's look at that. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. And who is the Son? Yeshua. And what does he represent? The Word. So if you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. If you follow according to the Word, right, he's going to grant you. It has to fall in line with the Word. Who is the Word? Yeshua is the Word in flesh. He was the example. So go back to his instructions. John 15:7. "If you abide in me and my word abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you." Did that just not seal what I just said a minute ago? The understanding? Because the word is in you. Yeshua is the word. So you need to, and again, he's giving you a second witness in John, that it will be done. Now, 1 John 5 and verses 14 and 15, "And this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the requests that we have asked of him." All right? So just make sure that you keep in the faith. Understand who your master is, who your guide is, and how does he speak to you? You need to figure it out. Well, in 1 John 5 and 14, "And this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us." right? He's not a liar. He's not a perpetrator. So, the power of prayer in your life can take you to endless bounds. When we don't meditate, when we don't have anything grateful or prayerful to stand for, what are we standing for? How are we living our lives? How are we being successful? Is it the luck of the Irish? Is it something that because you worked really hard and because you got a degree and because you worked your butt off, that it's all because of you that you're blessed? Or do you think that the Most High didn't have anything to do with your creation? See, oftentimes we get a little sidetracked. We think that our physical success is what makes us happy, is what makes us successful. The Most High allows you to do things, okay? But the devil can allow it too. He can bless you as well. So don't be so comfortable because the world is giving you the green lights. But are you following this word? What did Yeshua tell you to do? See, sometimes we get caught up. So hopefully this show gave you a little bit more on the insights of prayer. I enjoyed this topic, and you can also give us your feedback in our group, our Facebook group. That's My Sisters Keeper Radio Show. And you can follow us on Instagram and all the other social media outlets. And we are listed out on most podcasts. So make sure to share. So excited about it. Listen, Lakoti, thanks for tuning in this Sunday. You have an amazing week. Let's chat again next week, y'all's will.
You're tuned in to My Sisters Keeper Radio Show each and every Sunday at 6 p.m. here on Blog Talk Radio. Be sure to follow My Sisters Keeper Radio on all social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and join our live podcast discussions on all podcast platforms where we provide a voice for today's Hebrew woman. Based on the foundation of the Word, we discuss culture, music, news, health, family, relationships, and provide a safe platform for our daughters of Zion to find spirit when coming into the truth.